Good morning, Grace Kids. Welcome to another Sunday of talking about integrity. Chad, do you know what integrity is? Integrity is our big word this month, and it means this: choosing to be truthful in what we do and say. Choosing to be truthful in what we do and in what we say. Okay, so do you have a time? Oh, Chad's with us today. Hi, Chad. Do you have a time that you could tell us an example of when you were actually not truthful?
Okay, so I probably have not been truthful, but I just can't remember it.
So here's an example in our house that is real life, which means it's actually happened before. One of Chad's jobs or chores around our house is to take care of the dogs. We have 2 dogs, and by taking care of the dogs, what does that include?
Dog poop.
Dog poop. And what else?
Food and water.
Food and water. Are you looking at them?
Sorry.
Okay, food and water. So that means he has to feed the dogs. That means that you have to give them dirty water or clean water?
Fresh.
Fresh water is how we describe it. And then he also has to pick up
Dog poop.
Dog poop. So sometimes, here's what happens. Sometimes I ask Chad, hey, go take care of the dogs. And he knows that that means feed them, give them fresh water, and pick up the dog poop on the grass. And then what happens sometimes?
I kind of forget.
He kind of forgets. And maybe here's a lot of times, maybe he'll just feed the dogs because that's the easiest. He'll just give them some food, but he won't give them fresh water, or he won't
Pick up dog poop.
And so when Chad is not truthful, that means that it's harder for me to trust him the next time. Because maybe the next time I say, hey, go take care of the dogs, and he actually does it. You to give them food and fresh water, and he even picks up the dog poop. But do I trust him that time? Do I all the time?
No.
Why?
Because sometimes I don't always do it.
So when we're not truthful, then that means that we kind of lose
some trust.
We kind of lose some trust, huh? So we have a story today about an example of a true story about an example of a guy who was not truthful, and he lost a lot of trust. He lost a lot of trust. So we're going to jump into our story and say goodbye to Chad.
No! I want to help with the story.
Goodbye, Chad! All right, so jumping into our story today. It's a true story from the Old Testament. Remember, several weeks ago, or months ago or so, we talked about, when we talked about friendship and how friends stick up for each other, we talked about 2 men in the Old Testament named Elisha and Elijah. And actually, I totally drew their pictures wrong. I drew Elisha as being the man that didn't have any hair. And then Elijah was the one who the chariots took him up to heaven. Totally cool story how he didn't actually die. God just took him up to heaven. So today we're going to pick back up. A lot of times in the Old Testament, right, God used prophets to tell his people what he wanted them to hear. So Elisha continued Elijah's ministry and spoke for God and told the Israelites what they needed God to hear, or what God wanted them to hear. So picking up where our story takes place in the Old Testament, Israel had a king, as well as Elisha being the prophet that God used. And the king, the nation of Israel, and so the king at the time, and then there was this other country called Aram, and Aram had a king as well. And Israel and Aram, they weren't getting along. They were fighting. And actually, Aram had captured and taken captive some of Israel's people. And so there was a servant girl who was captured and worked for one of the commanders of Aram's army. Okay, this is a lot to keep track of, but stick with me, okay? So one of the commanders, a really important, good army commander in Aram's army was a man named Naaman. Okay? Naaman was his name. And he had, one of his servants was an Israelite girl who worked for his family. So here's what's interesting about Naaman. Naaman, like we mentioned, was a really good army commander, but he had a disease called leprosy. Leprosy is a disease that affects your skin, and it's super contagious and super painful. And so we have, here we go. We have a little puppet friend today, okay? So here we have Naaman, and you can kind of see how his hands are bandaged up and wrapped up, and even those spots on his face, like that is to show the disease of leprosy that Naaman had. And so Naaman was married, so here's a picture of his wife, and then this is the servant girl that was from Israel that's now living in Naaman's country of Aram. And so she's right here, she's brushing her hair, and she's just a servant. And she actually, the servant girl, remembers that, hey, there's a prophet in Israel who might be able to help Naaman. And so it's actually a really incredible story. She's not, even though she was captured and now works for the enemy, she is willing to offer help and say, hey, in Israel, in my country, there's a prophet who could help you. And so what Naaman has to do is go to the king of Aram and say, hey, I need, because they're enemies, because our little highlighter kings here are fighting, Naaman needs permission to go to the enemy's country and see this prophet. And so he does, and the king of Aram actually gives him permission to go, and then he sends letters. So the king of Aram sends a letter with Naaman to the king of Israel, and says, hey, this is my army commander. We heard that you're able to make him well, to cure him of his leprosy. And so when the king of Israel finds this out, he's kind of this mix of scared and mad, because he's like, who do you think I am? Do you think I'm God? I can't cure your leprosy. That's crazy. And so he thinks that it's some kind of an attack, and then the king of Aram will be really mad at him, and they'll keep fighting, and it's just all not good. So Elisha hears about this whole event that's happening and how Naaman comes to the king. Elisha hears about it, and so he sends a message to the king of Israel. Elisha sends a message to the king of Israel and says, hey, send Naaman to my house. Tell Naaman to come and see me. And so we have this picture. This is maybe here's Naaman again, because he's the guy that's got all the red spots and the bandages on his hands. And so he comes, he's going to go see Elisha, the prophet. Okay. So what happens is when he gets to Elisha's house, he sends out his servant. Elisha sends out his servant. And this little puppet guy here is our representation of Elisha's servant, and he has a funny name. His name is Gehazi. You can be glad that you have a name that's your own, not Gehazi. Personally, I always thought Gehazi was a lot younger, and this little puppet makes him seem like a much older man. So, which doesn't matter, but anyway. So Elisha sends out his servant Gehazi to see, get my other little puppet guy here, to see Naaman. Okay? And Elisha tells Gehazi to tell Naaman, hey, go to the Jordan River and wash 7 times, and you'll be healed. Just that simple. And while it seems super simple to us, and while we might already know the end of this story, Naaman was really upset. First of all, he was upset that Elisha didn't actually come out and see him, because he kind of was like, what? Do you know who I am? I'm the commander of the army of Aram, and I'm really important, and why did you just send your servant out to talk to me? You should have come out. And thankfully, thankfully, remember, Naaman also comes with a couple of servants. And so Naaman's servant says, if he would have told you to do something really that cost a lot of money, or to do something really elaborate, do you think you would have done it? Yes. So this is just something simple. Go to the Jordan River and wash 7 times. So that's what he does. He follows, ultimately he follows Gehazi's instructions, which came through Elisha, and he goes to the Jordan River, and you know what happens? He washes 7 times in the Jordan River, and his skin is healed. His leprosy is healed. Total miracle. So now he is looking, now he's looking really great. No more bandages on his hands, no more spots on his face. He's not diseased anymore. He's totally healed. And so he actually comes back. He goes back to Elisha's house and says, I want to pay you. I want to give you gifts. I'm healed. This is amazing. I want to thank you. And the way I want to thank you is by offering you money or gifts. What do you want? I'll give you anything. I'm healed. He's so excited and grateful. And in the book of 2 Kings, where this story takes place, chapter 5, verse 16 says, this is what Elisha says to Naaman. Okay, so this time he's talking with Elisha, and he says, I serve the Lord. You can be sure that he lives, and you can be just as sure that I won't accept a gift from you. So Elisha won't take any gift. He won't take any payment. He doesn't want Naaman to be saying anything like, well, I went to Israel and gave this prophet a bunch of money, and that's why he healed me. All the glory goes to God. All the praise, and the reason that Naaman is healed is because God worked a miracle. So that's what Elisha says to Naaman. And so I don't know if we flip this around. Now he's going to go home. So Naaman doesn't pay him anything, doesn't give him any gifts, and he takes off for home. Here's where the story gets interesting, and where the whole integrity and being truthful in what you do and say comes in. So Gehazi hears this. He hears what Elisha says to Naaman about how, nope, I'm not going to take anything from you. I'm not going to do that. So Gehazi decides, that's crazy. We could get something out of this rich, powerful army commander. And so Gehazi goes after Naaman without Elisha knowing. And he catches up to, Gehazi catches up to Naaman on the way home and says, actually, Elisha sent me to tell you that he would like 75 pounds of silver and 2 sets of clothes. He's lying. He's not being truthful. Totally like zero integrity going on here. And Naaman, which one? Right here. Naaman believes him. He totally believes him. And he was absolutely willing to give him a gift, pay whatever he needed. And so he's like, you bet, here's 75 pounds of silver and here's some clothes. You absolutely go for it. And so Gehazi leaves. He's like, he thinks he's made it. He thinks he's tricked him and it's no big deal. And he comes back to Elisha's house. And Elisha says, or first of all, Elisha says, hey, where'd you go? Where'd you go? And Gehazi lies again and says that he hadn't gone anywhere. And so here's what happens. Elisha tells Gehazi that he knows the truth. That he knows the truth, and things are going to get really bad for Gehazi. So 2 Kings chapter 5, a few verses later in verse 27, it says this. This is what Elisha tells to Gehazi, the servant. He says, you and your children after you will have Naaman's skin disease forever. That's bad. So because you were not showing integrity, because you were not truthful, because you lied, now the terrible, yucky, nasty disease of leprosy that Naaman had, Gehazi, you and your children will have for the rest, forever. So you'll have it, your kids will have it, your grandkids will have it, everybody in your family after you, generation after generation is going to have leprosy. And Gehazi, he tears his clothes and he notices, and you don't see it necessarily because this is just a paper little puppet, but immediately Gehazi has leprosy. So here's the deal, wrapping up here. Gehazi's lie earned him some nice clothes, but it also cost him Elisha's trust. And unfortunately, he and his family ended up with Naaman's disease of leprosy. So Gehazi found out something that's really important for us to remember and for us to know. And it's this. It's our bottom line. You'll see it on the screen here. It says this: when you're not truthful, you lose trust. We'll read that again. When you're not truthful, you lose trust. That's a big deal, guys. That's a really, really big deal. When we're not truthful, we lose trust. Remember when we were talking with Chad at the beginning and just his simple job of taking care of the dogs? When Chad is not truthful, he loses trust, and then I don't trust him. When I'm not truthful, when I don't keep my word, when I don't mean what I say, when I tell lies, then I cannot be trusted. And the same goes for you. So we have an example of how not to show integrity. Gehazi did not show integrity. He was not truthful in what he did or with what he said. And because of that, because he wasn't truthful, he lost trust. And also, here's something super important. Remember, there were major consequences for Gehazi's lies. There were major consequences because he wasn't truthful. And that showed up immediately for him. His hands, his face, his skin was covered with leprosy. So we have an example in Gehazi of how to lose trust. We also want to remember that Jesus is a perfect example of being trustworthy and of showing integrity. Jesus always told the truth. He always told the truth. And because Jesus always told the truth, tells the truth, will tell the truth, we can trust him. Jesus will never be in a position where he won't be truthful and then we won't be able to trust him. So Gehazi, not so great, huh? But Jesus is someone that we can always trust. So we want to remember that when we are not truthful, we're going to lose trust. And that takes a long time to regain. So being truthful is just a much better way to go, showing integrity. We'll just wrap up here and pray and remember that integrity is being truthful in what we do and what we say, and how our bottom line this week is when we're not truthful, we lose trust. Let's pray. God, thank you that you are a God who can be trusted. Thank you that you always tell the truth. Thank you that you can help us to show integrity. I pray that this week we would remember to be truthful in what we do and say, that we would remember that when we're not truthful, we're going to lose trust. So the people that we're around, mom, dad, brothers, sisters, family, friends, whoever we're around this week, help us to be truthful. Help us to remember integrity. Help us to even remember the story of Gehazi and how it ended really, really badly for him because he was not willing to show integrity. Thank you that you love us all the time. Thank you that you take care of us, that you're with us, that you give us an example of what truthfulness looks like. In Jesus' name, amen. All right, guys, we'll see you next week. Remember integrity. Bye.